Welcome to Better Relationships, Better Work, where we explore how to make work better through the power of relationships. My name's Jason Lauritsen. I'm the author of 2 books, a speaker and leadership trainer on a mission to fix how we treat people at work. Now, in today's episode, we talk about love and why we think that managers and leaders should love their people. We also explore the power of looking for the good and potential in each individual and how to create space as a leader at work for people to discover their own unique genius. Now, my guest this week is Joshua Berry. Joshua is a world-class facilitator of change. He's the co-founder and managing director of Econic, an innovation, leadership, and organizational culture consulting group. He's also a speaker and the author of a great new book titled Dare to be Naive. Now, I suspect once you meet Joshua today, you're going to want to know more about him, and you're certainly going to want to buy a copy of this book. So you will find links to learn about his company, to buy his book, and to connect with him in the episode description. There's so much to learn and think about in this conversation, so I'm sure that you will enjoy Joshua Berry. Joshua, thank you for being here for this conversation.
Jason, I've been looking forward to this for weeks. Thanks for having me.
All right. Well, as you were warned, the way that I like to get into this conversation is to get a little bit of a flavor for kind of your relational style, if you will, to kind of help us understand how you like to interact with people. And the question I like to start with, it's become a curiosity for me, is where do you...
And continues to be building.
You fall on the introvert to extrovert spectrum?
Yeah, I think it shifted over the years. If 10 was extrovert and 1 was introvert, I likely would have put myself at a 6 or 7 in the past. I'm probably more like a 4 now. I do really enjoy connecting with people one-on-one, but the same energy that I used to get of being in a group of people and wanting to feed off of that is a lot less. I also think that sometimes what I've seen is people confuse charisma or the ability to interact with people with extroversion. And I don't know if you've hit into that ever before, but a lot of people assume, oh, you must be a raging extrovert. But yeah, I think they confuse it with some of that.
Agreed. And it's interesting. What I've come to understand that as is there's something I think we call it's like performative extroversion, which is, like you can put on the energy or the face or you can learn to sort of show up that way. But if you're not a natural extrovert, at the end of it, there's a huge price to pay, right? In terms of energy and recharging and that. And it's interesting that you say you're trending more towards the introvert end of the scale, because that seems to be a common thing that I'm hearing from people. And I don't know if that's with age. For me, it's been true. I don't know if it's age or if also the pandemic isolation effect probably moved us a little bit that way, perhaps too. I don't know, but it's really fascinating to me that I think virtually everyone I'm talking to seems to be moving towards the introvert side. There's something in the air.
There's something in the air. There is also, I have always been a people pleaser. I'll say I've been even more a people pleaser in my younger years. And therefore that external validation and external energy created some of those cycles for me. And so I think as I've become more comfortable with who I am and where my energy is drawn from, that has likely probably recalibrated some of that.
So how do you think that shows up for you in your one-on-one relationships with other people?
Yeah, it's still a strong interest in wanting to get to connect with people and a strong interest in them. It also means, though, that I can, and maybe this is just me, but I can go a long time between seeing really good friends, and that's okay. And so I see that as part of this extroversion, introversion sort of thing. Like there's an energy feed, and when we have a good, deep experience together, I don't think I need to wake up tomorrow morning and be with that person again. And so I wonder if that plays into it a little bit.
Interesting. No, I like that. Something to reflect on in our in our extra time we're giving ourselves by ourselves as we get older,
Yeah.
apparently. So what one of the things I'm really curious about is what would you say is something that you learned about relationships growing up as a child that still shapes how you think about or show up in relationships today?
Yeah, and this is a something that has a strong and a shadow side to it, and that is, I moved a lot as a kid. In fact, my kids recently were asking like who my elementary school teachers were, and I can't recall probably half of them. And what that meant is I was put into new situations all the time, and I think that allowed me to practice a lot of getting to know people and making friends very quickly. And what that likely did is it fueled that people pleaser ability that I mentioned before. And it fueled a little bit of this almost like chameleon likeness, the chimerical approach to being able to be what people need in certain situations. And so that's something that, as I've grown older, I've had to become even more aware of that and figuring out, okay, when am I leaning into a space and when is it useful? For instance, maybe facilitating a large room. That superpower is amazing. And yet, in a true, authentic relationship with someone, catching yourself and almost being more respectful of boundaries.
That's interesting because it is, I mean, I can see where my wife had the same experience growing up. I think she was in like 13 schools or something before she got to high school. And what's interesting about that too is I think there's sort of social adaptability and you want to make friends, but there's also a layer of just survival, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's where the people pleasing and like I need a group to be protected in this sort of jungle that is elementary school or middle school. And so
Yeah.
you have to learn how to quickly do that. And because it's fueled by survival, I wonder how that shows up or if that's kind of the dark side or shadow side of it, is the motivation behind it.
I think it is, and I'll share a specific tool in that toolbox is reading nonverbals and having a pretty strong intuition to people's faces and everything. Again, great in a room or with other people and picking up on the smallest subtleties. Because to your point, that likely helped +1 in a lot of those situations, the survivability. And yet, I can find myself reading too much into those things or assuming or jumping to conclusions too quickly and maybe not being curious about what actually might be happening underneath someone else. So, yeah, there's definitely some things there. And then the other shadow side to that is people who are not very non-verbally expressive or those moments when my loved one will put on a clay mask and she cannot emote at all. Like those are moments where there's something I know in my DNA that like it starts to frazzle and I'm like, I don't know how to read this situation. I don't know how to comprehend this.
Yeah, it's like that. I'm getting that image of like in a movie where the robot starts to like malfunction, right? The circuits are
Cannot
fried.
compute.
Yes, that's
There are
right.
times where that, and so again, my wife and I have this thing now. Like I can't really speak anything serious to her when she has a clay mask on because I cannot read what's going on.
Interesting. Well, that's powerful adaptive strategy. Good agreement to have, I guess. So I think that's a good transition for us. Let's as you know, I gave you a little bit of homework prior to this conversation, which was to think about a couple of different relationships. One being a relationship in your life that is a personal relationship that you feel is really strong and positive and healthy, so that we can explore that for some insights or some lessons. So, who are we going to talk about?
We're going to talk about my college friend, Dave.
Dave. Excellent. So tell me a little bit about the relationship and kind of what it is you really value about this relationship.
Sure. So Dave and I were, I would say, probably just acquaintances in college, and then didn't really reconnect until maybe about 10 years after college. And at that time, he was the leader in an organization here in Nebraska. And um, in that instance, it was more of a reconnection of seeing if there were opportunities for us to be able to help him in his work. And what then bloomed from that was a really deep friendship and love for this man and how we interact with each other, which I can explain more on that. But then also something that like was a whole person sort of thing, right? A person with whom you could talk work, you could talk life, you could talk relationships, you could talk kids, you could everything all around it. And to this day, again, he may not be the person that I see the most often, as I was hinting at before, but is definitely one of those people that I'm most inclined to check in with, or he's most inclined to check in with me.
Mm. So talk to me about what you think it is that, like, what was it about that relationship that kind of like, how did it become this thing that it is that's so important and valuable to you now? And what is it that you could isolate or maybe talk to me about that makes it work? What is it about sort of how this relationship sort of ebbs and flows, or how you show up in it, that makes it work?
Yeah. I think on both sides, there is space created for the other person's, I don't know, strengths to shine, right? There are times in my life where I've reached out to him to ask about analyzing something or how to connect in a way or how to think about public policy in a way. There have been times where he's been able to pull us in for work, and that work, maybe it was in a low spot where it was life-giving to me and to our company. There were spaces I think that I've been able to create for him to think about what if and where might things go in his life, and that may then maybe get to the second place, which is um, it seemed like the questions and the interests that he had were also things that I might be wrestling with. He has a great integrity and a great desire to want to do more. And that desire of like, what is the right thing to do and how can I help more and how can I be present and content with where I'm at right now is a central struggle and theme in my life. And so what I love about the relationship is it also provides a mirror often when I'm maybe showing up as coach or questioner or helper, it's almost always a mirror back to me. And I think that there's similar things there too.
Hmm. There's a lot of stuff I heard in there. One is kind of a almost an orientation towards generosity towards one another, sort of,
Yeah.
like, I'm going to not only give you space, but if I can create for you something that is of value, or if I have a key to open a door that would be valuable to you, I'm going to let you use that key, or whatever that looks like. It seems like that is a really rich component of it, which I think is really interesting and powerful. And then the other thing I heard was an alignment of interests and values and motivation. And I think the motivation piece is really interesting to me, because you often hear about values alignment, that we value the same thing or that we have interests. I think that's often, but this idea of like, we're both similarly motivated or on a similar journey.
Yeah.
Actually heard somebody talk about people like this as journey partners at one point.
Hmm.
And I think that's a really interesting way of thinking about it too. Like, we're both on a journey kind of together, but our journeys are going to look a little bit different, but they're similar in a lot of ways.
Yeah, that's very well said. And I think a common thread of this journey is the are we doing enough and are we finding contentment with what we have? And that ebb and flow that I think is so central, honestly, to everybody's journey in life, is one that we've been able to almost get into some lockstep into. And and also to see it not only maybe in the traditional sense that people are hearing this in terms of a business or a professional sense, but also family wise, right? Like, how are you relating to your aging parents? How am I relating to my aging parents? And this ebb and flow that comes with that.
That's it's an incredible relationship to have. Those are really important relationships. And I love this. That really at least resonates deeply with me, this sort of balance between, um, am I doing enough, or am I pushing hard enough? Am I reaching hard enough versus am I missing everything, right? Because I'm reaching so hard and thinking I need to do so much that I'm missing the good stuff that's already there, that's right in front of me. And
Yeah.
that having someone to reflect that back is incredibly powerful. So I think there's a lot of stuff to learn from here, but let me see if we can maybe isolate it down to, is there, when you think about that relationship, is there a specific practice or maybe a lesson or insight from your relationship with Dave that you could pull out for us that you think has been helpful to you, maybe in other relationships that you have?
I'm going to boil it to two if I can. The first is following an intuition of when to reach out. It's an interesting thing, but I've heard it from him and I've heard it from me. I've heard it from me. I've heard it on my side too. That uh, there are times where someone maybe wakes up or during the day, someone jumps into mind for you, and following that intuition to just connect and say, "Hey, what's up?" or "I was thinking of you." Um, and it feels like, not all the times, but maybe half the times, it's, wow, did I really need this? Or I didn't even know I needed to check in right now. And so that paying attention to those connections that you have, and when an intuition rises in you to reach out, I think that's a takeaway, personal or professional. I think the other is I I use Eric Fromm's definition of love, and that is active concern for the care and growth of another. And that active concern means that it is talking, but it's also doing or being, right, for that other person. And it's easy for me to want to do that for others and help and try to take care of others. It's harder for me to receive that. And yet I found that that ends up being one of the best relationships here. So relationships where there is help back and forth ends up being, I think, some of the richest ones, at least a hallmark of this relationship.
It's awesome. And we're going to come back to this in a minute. But before we do that, I want to transition to the other relationship I asked you to think about, which was a relationship either at work or born from work, that has had a real significant impact on you, continues to have a significant impact, whatever, on your professional growth or career. So who did you think about for this work relationship?
Well, because of some of our past conversations, the person I thought of was one of my favorite managers at Hy-Vee. And so Craig, the store director at Hy-Vee when I was younger.
So tell us a little bit about Craig. And I love that I've heard this story, so I'm excited to hear you tell a little bit about it. But let's I guess we can't do the whole story, probably the version that the long version I've heard, but let's do the short version about this relationship. What was it about Craig or that relationship that had the biggest impact on you?
Yeah. So I would have been 16 and first real job. The impact was his belief in my potential and being able to say, try this. And Craig and a couple of other people in life, I feel like, gave me opportunities that, in retrospect, were well above probably what I felt I had earned at that opportunity, but they saw something, or they knew that I was standing on the shoulders of something that, for whatever reason, allowed them to trust and naively give into the let's see what this kid can do. And so that vote of confidence and seeing of potential was key.
So for those that are not in the Midwest, Hy-Vee is a grocery store, a big grocery store chain. One of the things that Joshua and I share in common is that I also worked at Hy-Vee when I was a young lad in high school as well. Do you remember a specific, sort of a short, specific kind of interaction or experience that you had that stands out in your mind that really has stuck with you, that demonstrates this belief that he showed in you?
Yeah, there are a bunch. One that I'll pull out is he would write me notes to get out of, it would have been my junior year of high school or senior year of high school, so I could attend some of the weekly managers meetings. And it wasn't until I got pulled into the principal's office saying, only parents can write notes to get you out of school. Craig, the Hy-Vee manager, cannot write notes to get you out of school. But he saw that and said, you are going to get in here. You're fine. You're already good in school. You're going to figure stuff out. I want you to come learn some of these things that are here and be around this. And so it was not only the vote of confidence of he saw some way that I could add to it, but it was also maybe this unconventional approach. If I zoom out onto it, it's the here's the rules. But if you get down to the integrity and intent of what's happening, I want to shake those rules up a little bit to try something different. And that was really a hallmark of a lot of his other successes that he had as a leader, was he saw the bigger game, I think, that was being played, and then and then for good, used different ways to be able to move throughout that game.
This webcast is sponsored by my longtime friends at Inspiring Workplaces. Now, if you are someone who's working to create an engaging and inspiring workplace for your employees, and of course you are, that's why you're here, then listen up. Inspiring Workplaces is a global community of tens of thousands of HR and employee experience professionals that you can join for free. As a member, you will gain access to thousands of articles and videos and podcasts and events that will help you change the world by changing the world of work. They are also home to the Inspiring Workplaces Awards that recognize the best workplaces in the world. You can learn about the application process at their website. So please go visit inspiring-workplaces.com to learn more and to join the community. That's inspiring-workplaces.com. So as you've reflected on this, as I know, I mean, we've already established that you are a person prone towards reflection and making sense of things. What would you say were the big lessons or the big lesson that you've taken from your experience with Craig as you reflect back on it, and how you have applied that elsewhere, whether that's as a leader in your organization or as a leader coming up? Like, what lessons did you take forward and apply?
Yeah, a huge one is look for the good and the potential in every single person, and that goes to the heart of this belief that that everybody does have some sort of genius inside of them, and then create a space for them to practice that. And if I were to boil it down, like that is the essence of what my work is, what our business is, and what I'm trying to do with other businesses, is help people see that work is a great big practice sandbox for people to continue to understand what that genius is inside of them. And I see Craig as one of the first people who lit that up for me.
Well, then let's stay right there then and sort of transition into how we can take these lessons and pull them into practice at work. So as you think about this, how do you do that, right? So when you bring someone onto your team, or if you have someone onto your team, I think one of the challenges that we often face as managers or leaders is that the way that we traditionally think about jobs is, right, we start and I understand the reasons behind this, but HR gives us this guidance to draw this very specific box that has very specific skills and very specific responsibilities and requirements and demands. And then we go find someone who at least sort of fits, and we jam them in that box. And then our job as a manager is to try to sort of keep them in that box and help them do the best they can inside that box. And I know that that's a dramatization, but I think that's largely where managers feel confined and stuck. So how do you resist that? How do you, knowing that those things need to be done, what does it look like?
Yeah. Hey, so probably 15 years ago, was one of my first workshops that I ever designed and wrote, and it was around job sculpting. And I think it was very idealistic at that time, because I very much said, well, just throw the boxes out and shape jobs around people, and that's how you got to do it. And there were some great takeaways out of that, because it hits on all those concepts that you mentioned. But to your point, there are things that the system needs that sometimes people hit and sometimes they don't. And so the way I approach it now more with managers is to think about it as teams, and to think about what are all those blocks together. And if you push them all together and then you layered these people on top of them that are not squares, I always used to say it's all more like an amoeba, right? Like in terms of the shape that they fit over these job descriptions. Well, now together as a group, we can start to see where there might be strengths and there might be opportunities for job sharing or task sharing or technology to come in and play a job of that. So I think uh, the concrete takeaway is if you can rise up one level and look at the macro objective or tasks that need to happen rather than an individual looking at it as the team or the process or the system, can use that to be able to help you start to see, oh, here's some things that Jason really excels at. Here's some things that he's going to grow in, and we can create an opportunity for it. Or here's some things he's maybe should grow in, but really it's probably not going to happen. It doesn't light him up at all and everything. How might we pull Joshua in to help out with this or find another way to be able to work through it? And so it's still the job sculpting concept, but I think pulling it out to a little bit the next level out.
Well, there's a layer, if I go back, if I kind of reel us back to the relationship piece of this, or sort of a relationship lens on this. I think part of what I am hearing is that there's an element of like, you need to see someone for who they are and what their true talents and abilities and capabilities are, and show up with them, sort of meet them there and help them find their way to performance or to success from there. One of the things I have traditionally found challenging with people often is they don't, like, if you don't have, sometimes if you don't, we often put people in these boxes. They don't have a chance to show off what they're great at or what their genius is. And there's a lot of people that don't even know. They haven't been asked to explore this. So if you're in a relationship as a manager or a leader and you've got someone or people on your team, how do you get there with them? What kinds of interactions or conversations are you having to try to find that genius or that internal talent?
Yeah, I write about this anecdote at the end of my book. I was in a facilitating retreat for a sales and growth team, and I watched this masterful questioning from the leader of this group. And Jared said, almost as a warm-up question, he said, what's something you would love to do even if it had no benefit to the organization or team? Now, that question only worked because he had good trust with the team and everything. So that's foundational to all of this. But then he led off. He's like, if I wasn't doing this job, I would be doing XYZ thing. And because of that trust, because of his modeling there, I then heard from the other team members, oh, I'd open a boutique this, or I would be a caddy in Scotland, or I would be working half the time, same job, but on a catamaran in the Caribbean, right? Like these sorts of things. And so I think it does start with questioning and helping, as a manager, helping your team see that you also understand the bigger game that's being played here too, right? And I think Jared conveyed to his team, not only through that question, but through his practices, that he was more interested in their flourishing, and that was important. So I think you have to baseline with that, and then you can start to ask some of those questions. In terms of the practice side of it, I always encourage people to say, how do you create space for your people to go do volunteer opportunities or join boards or do other things? Because oftentimes in volunteers or nonprofit boards or nonprofit volunteering or any of those things, you can get an opportunity to practice some skills that may be different than the ones that you get to practice in the job.
That's great advice. But you got to pay attention, right? You have to, as a leader, you have to pay attention to what they're doing and what they're drawn to and what they talk about and all those kinds of things, because they'll reveal it to you if you're paying attention. So
there you go. And I think that's the thing. It's happening whether you know it or not. And to your point of, if they may not be conscious of it, but it's probably happening through the things they choose to put their discretionary effort into, or their hobbies or other things, right? Like I've even given people the homework of just keeping track daily, the moments or the hours where they felt joy and the moments where they felt boredom, and just starting to keep a task log of some of those things. And you can start to draw some patterns, especially with a good, well-intentioned manager.
That's a perfect, I think, bridge back to one of the lessons that you called out from your relationship with Dave that I want to go back to, which was that you, in that relationship, are helping each other sort of find this or maintain the balance between doing enough and finding contentment. Joy, maybe I would be another word I would add on top of that, depending on what you are looking for. I'm curious because that seems to connect back to what you just said a little bit, which is asking people to kind of pay attention to what's working or what's not. A little different layer, but similar. So how would you say, based on what you've learned about the way that you and Dave interact and do this for one another, what would be some ideas about how you bring that into how you lead or how you manage others to do that with those folks or to foster a better relationship there?
Yeah. I think one of them that connects those two is there has to be this curiosity from my side to him or to the person that I'm leading of like, I don't know all the answers, or there might be something else. There's a what if, and being committed to learning around those things plays out in both of those. I am constantly with Dave or with other ones reflecting afterwards of, I wonder why I was supposed to have that conversation with him. Like what mirror was being brought back to me there. And I think great leaders and managers do the same thing. It isn't just a one-way extraction of things from your employees. It is this constant back and forth connection, the relationship, as you said, between these individuals in terms of whatever they're doing. I think the other lesson that I'm now thinking that comes out of it is we talk a lot about the day-to-day or this job or this parent or this opportunity or whatever it is, but there's always like a bigger story that this is all a part of. And he and I know that we're talking about this bigger story. Same thing with your employee is yes, you're working on the day-to-day, you're trying to get some things done. But if you have like an underlying idea of like, why are we doing this? What's my purpose in all of this? Why are you working? Why am I working? If that is at least a present theme throughout some of these things, you have a lot more grace and a lot more space for how you're exploring and how you're approaching a lot of the day-to-day things.
And I would add on to that, one of the things that's coming up for me as I'm listening to you talk about this is that, like in your relationship with Dave, the two of you, like you're reflecting to each other and you're journeying together. And so I would assume that, like when you're thinking about, am I doing enough? Dave's asking you questions to try to help you self-regulate or self-define how much is enough.
Yeah.
And the same thing on contentment, helping you get clear about what your expectations are there, sort of leading you through that, but can't set that for you, right? There's no power dynamic. The power dynamic there is equal, but at work, if you're a leader, what I'm thinking about is like one of the things you can do for people in this balance is, as a leader, if your people are struggling with, am I doing enough at work? And so they're overdoing it, that is your fault. And it's something you can fix, right? You can have that conversation with them to say, let's get really clear on how much is enough, so that then the other side of it about this contentment, which I hear in terms of like, which is really being able to give yourself permission to feel good about what you're doing and take the time to pursue things that you're passionate about that maybe don't have to do with this pursuit of enough. And as a leader, one of the things that you can give them is permission.
Yeah.
And they're probably waiting on both the clarity of how much is enough and permission to actually feel content or pursue the things that give them joy or contentment. And so I just am thinking that like there's such a beautiful opportunity there as a manager to not miss that. If you have that kind of agency to do that for people, that's a really incredible thing that you can and should do for your people.
Yeah, I 100%. The poet Khalil Gibran said, "Work is love made visible." And if I use that definition of love that I had before, work is active concern for the care and growth of another made visible. You as a manager have the space to be able to use work for exactly that, to be able to help see where there is care and growth and concern and other. And this is where I'll insert, that doesn't mean and be a pushover or be soft or other, right? Like true care and concern for another is also sharing that hard news when maybe they aren't actually doing enough, and holding that right balance between creating the safety and accountability for what you're trying to do. Because if you're believing that that person has the potential to achieve whatever they're trying to achieve, okay, well, then you get to create that space for that. And I don't know, being a manager or leader is such an amazing gift, when you start to see maybe a bigger picture of what you're working with.
Indeed, it is. And that feels like a perfect place to wrap this conversation. So, Joshua, I knew it would be a good one. This exceeded my expectations. I am so appreciative of how you travel through the world and how you share your heart and your mind so freely. So thank you so much for being here and having this conversation with me.
Jason, this was wonderful. And shout out to Craig or Dave if you end up listening to this. I love you both. And thanks, Jason, for giving me an opportunity to be able to highlight that.
Appreciate it. Hope you enjoyed today's episode. More importantly, I hope you learned something from the episode that can help you right away. Now, if you'd like to reflect on what you can learn from your own healthy, positive relationships to make work better, I've included a link in the description below where you can access and download what I call the relationship reflection exercise. This includes the same questions that I ask each of my guests to reflect on prior to our conversation on the webcast. Also, if you found today's episode valuable, I'd ask 3 quick favors of you. Number 1, please like the episode. By liking the video and adding a comment if something spoke to you or stood out to you as really significant, you give me some great and valuable feedback, but you also help others find the video. I'd also ask you to subscribe to the channel. That does 2 important things. 1, it makes sure that you won't miss any upcoming episodes, and it sends me the message that you like the kind of content that I'm creating here. And finally, please share this video with someone who you think might benefit. What better gift can you give someone than the gift of better relationships and a better work experience? I'm really grateful that you were here today, and I look forward to seeing you next time.